Linnell Griffith from Shawnee County GOP, here with the hardest working person in the Senate, Caryn Tyson, who is somebody who really wants to make life better for Kansans, and a big part of that is reining in property taxes. She was the primary architect of the revenue neutral rate bill, which gives transparency to the potential of our property taxes raising, which they often do. And again, trying to get an assessment cap on your property taxes. What does all that mean? We will talk about that this evening. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Linnell, and you give me too much credit. It is a team effort. Nobody gets anything done alone.
True.
You work together to generate ideas and to get good policy.
Yep.
And I'm very blessed to have good friends like you and good legislators and others that work as hard as I do. So thank you. It's very kind of you.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And dare I say, sometimes I hear just people in my circles say, oh, all elected officials are corrupt. And I'm like, oh, no. You don't know how hard those good ones work to make life better for us. Here we are with an opportunity to rein in property taxes, a tax of something that we're taxed on what we own. We don't realize gains when the value of our homes or land goes up, but yet we have to give the government an ever increasing amount just to keep what's already ours. Does that seem fair?
No, it's not. And it's a subjective value, I feel, that your property taxes are based on. Because if you would put 5 different appraisers on the same property, odds are you would come up with at least 3, if not 4 or 5 more different values.
Yeah. So let me try to explain how I see property taxes as a taxpayer, and then correct me or add on if I'm off on anything. Okay. So basically, I'm a taxpayer. I pay a lot of taxes. I get my property tax bill. Well, first, I get my revenue neutral rate. It tells me how much my property taxes might go up, and if I don't like that, I can go to hearings and say, please don't raise my property taxes, which I do. They always raise them. Nevertheless, we try. So property taxes, when you get your bill that you end up writing to your county treasurer, how do they come up with that big number? So it's my understanding that an appraiser comes around and says, this is how much I think your house is worth. And they might be right, they might not be right, but they say how much it's worth. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's your appraised value. And then they take that value, and then depending on the type of property it is, like if it's ag land or if it's a home, I'll use the example of a home, then they take a percentage of that appraised value, and that becomes your assessed value. So, I get it. Appraised value, we think if your house sold, it would go for $100,000. And then the assessed value is like 11.5% of that. And then that assessed value, that is the base number for which you get taxed on. Am I correct so far?
That is absolutely correct. I want to add a couple of things, if I may. The revenue neutral letter that you get, I understand in this area that they tend to ignore the people that show up at the meetings. Even when I attended a couple of them just to see what was going on, and they had overflow, and they disregarded. But my home county has stayed revenue neutral since that law went into place. They have not. So it is working. And last year, over 62% of the taxing authorities stayed revenue neutral out of the 4,000.
Wow.
So it is working. It is working in some places. But we need to strengthen the law so that it works in more places. Right. And that's why we're talking about SCR1616.
Absolutely.
And the appraisers, too, they do a good job. They work within the parameters that they're given. And those parameters are so difficult, and that's therein lies the problem. That's why you can get the so many different values in the subjectiveness, that it is a complex process, and we need to address that also.
Yeah. So, well, my take would be that this SCR1616 does address that in an elegant way. But so you get your assessed value, And then that is taken times a mill rate, synonymous with mill levy or mills, which is it's essentially a percentage. So like if you have a mill rate and it's a number and you just move the decimal over to the left 3 times, that's a decimal you can use as a percentage and get a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So and then that ends up being my tax bill. But for one taxing authority, I have a good 10 taxing authorities on my bill, and then I write one check. So your appraised value becomes your assessed value based on the type of property it is, times basically a percentage.
Yes, the mill levy, which is set by the county clerk based off of what budget they want to collect, how much property tax they want to collect. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, so that's my perspective as a taxpayer looking at my bill. Because I think that kind of gets lost sometimes. So shall we jump into now Senate Concurrent Resolution 1616?
That'd be great. SCR 1616, the premise of it is the base. The appraisals still go up and down. It doesn't address those or change those or anything. But as you said, the key is the assessed value. And so it limits the increase on the assessed value to 3% or less each year. And what it does is there's actually a conditional statement in there. I won't get too complex. But if the assessed value, that it would actually be calculated without the cap versus the cap assessed value, it takes the lower of the two. So you're not locked in. It takes the lower of the two.
Okay.
But the key is that the assessed value is limited to 3% or less each year. It's transferable. So when the property sells or change ownership, that cap transfers with it. In fact, we call it the cap amendment, the cap assessment protection amendment. And the Senate started it at a baseline of 2022. So people are saying that this isn't a tax cut, but we start the baseline of your assessed value in 2022. So it would
Helpful.
reduce your property taxes. The locals can raise the mill levy and capture the money if they need to, but the 20 mil and other constant values, that is an absolute reduction in your property taxes.